So without further ado, I'd like to introduce John Childs. John's the founder of Childs Boolean Training and a senior technical sourcer. He started his recruiting career over 20 years ago. His first 3 years he spent cold calling names out of an IEEE membership directory written in a font so small it would blind an eagle. And then in the late 90s he gained access to a resume database, and that really transforms the course of his career. He found great success sourcing candidates using the Boolean search method, which we'll learn more about today, and sought to share his wisdom with all of us. He's in the process of authoring a book on Boolean. That's also a workbook with exercises. In fact, that's how we had got connected with John, because we put out a basic guide to Boolean search and then read John's advanced guides to Boolean search and invited him to teach here today. He's been a great friend and advisor to Identified, so I'm pleased to turn this over to John Childs.
Welcome all to Boolean. There's a lot of misunderstanding and mystique and mystery surrounding Boolean, so my goal today is to make this so simple that you're going to need help to not understand it. In its most basic, simplistic form, Boolean is about picking words most likely to be found on resumes you're looking for, and at the same time, these words not to be found on resumes you don't want. And we'll step back from Boolean a little bit and kind of make a parallel into looking for missing emails in Outlook. So like I've had an email 3 months ago, I'm trying to find an Outlook, and I've searched, I've tried everything. But I think a minute and say, what is one key word in that email that I'm looking for? I was just having a technical discussion. What is one keyword in there that's most like on the one I'm looking for and most likely not on anything else I've looked for? So I go through, and at the end of the email I was talking about the Beatles song, I Am the Walrus. I thought walrus. So I can go back into Outlook, type in walrus, boom, I found my lost email. That's basically what we're going to be doing with Boolean, picking out keywords that are there and keywords that are not on the resumes you're not looking for. Next slide. And this is, I've covered that. So again, when you pick these keywords out, it's not perfectly. I'm getting an echo. Hello? I'm getting an echo. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Okay. Again, when you pick these words out, Boolean is an imperfect tool, so the words won't perfectly either include in or exclude out terms that you're looking for or resumes you're looking for. Next slide. Boolean. A lot of people get thrown by that word. I thought it was B, an Ivy League football cheer. More likely it is D. George Boole was a mathematician in the late 1800s. Came up with this concept. After teaching a math class, he walked 3.5 miles down the road in the rain, caught pneumonia, was in the bed, and back then they thought whatever made you sick would make you well. And his wife threw a bucket of ice water on him and killed the poor guy. So that's George Boole. Next slide. Okay, this is a Lake Resume. This reservoir was actually named after Robert Resume. And this is the fishing is great. Now, the person in the boat, that's you and me. We're sitting in a boat. We're on a lake. We're fishing. But all we can see is the top of the water. Now, we know that there are fish underneath there. And if you look down, you see what I'm sure you, without explanation, immediately recognize as resume fish swimming around. So we drop a line in the water or a string. That worked out kind of nice. A Boolean string with a hook on it. And you're trying to track resume fish. And sometimes you'll pull up a resume that's great, and sometimes you'll pull up an old boot that you don't want. You thought it was a great fish. So if we look down at the very bottom, it talks about Boolean, and or not, quotation marks, asterisks, and parentheses. These are the basic Boolean operators I use for like Identified Recruit, Monster, LinkedIn Recruit, and so forth. If you're going to be using Google, then I've seen the spreadsheets of sites like Google up to 30 to 40 operators, but we're going to be focusing just on these. Okay, next slide. Okay, the slide has changed a little bit. Anyhow, the slide on the left, I was going to have gibberish words above below John Doe, below the senior technical recruiter, then show them to the right how they're gone, but that's okay. I'm a visual learner. For you auditory learners, you may not need this so much, but I like to have a visual image of a resume and keywords scattered on the resume without just abstractly talking about, hey, if you had a resume with this. So next slide. Okay, we got 3 resumes here, John Doe, Richard Rowe, Joe Bow. These are going to be, these 3 resumes, quote unquote, are going to be on all of our descriptions of the and, or, not, so forth. So the and word, it means that all words that you and together have to be somewhere on the resume. So let's go down to Boolean search strings, that little box beneath there below where it says senior and technical and recruiter. So that means that all 3 of those words have to be somewhere on the resume in no particular order at this point. So you can look at John Doe. He has senior technical recruiter. That'd be a good resume. That'd be a fish you're pulling up. A boot would be, you'd be pulling up is the one that says, my daughter's a senior in high school, wants to get in a technical field, has been talking to Army recruiter. That's a boot. The third one would be a boot and not a good resume. I'm an engineer looking for a job, so I'm calling a senior technical recruiter. So that's just one example where it's not perfect. It's good, but it's not a totally foolproof method. But we're going to find ways to improve this and make it more accurate. At the very bottom in the box, under Boolean search strings, you see recruiter and senior. So all 3 of those resumes to be pulled up have to have the word recruiter and senior in them. And you see to the right of that string, yes, yes, yes. You have to have all yeses through there. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Or just means that if you or words together, just one or more of those words have to appear anywhere on the resume in order to be pulled up, or again, like in fishing terms, surface, brought to the surface and pulled up out of a database. If you look at under Boolean strings at the bottom there, you've got senior or technical or recruiter or elephant. And you look at John Doe number 1, yeah, he's got one of those, 2, 3, he's got 3, but he can only have one of those terms and we pull him up. If you look at Richard Rowe, same deal. He's got all 4 of those keywords, but he didn't need all 4, he just needs one of those words when you use or. Same thing for number 3, it would be pulled up also. So for senior technical recruiter or elephant, we have yeses on the John Doe, Richard Rowe, and Joe Bow. But now let's flip it around a little bit. Let's go, instead of or, let's go back to use and. So that you have senior and technical and recruiter and elephant in there. So if you look at John Doe or resume number 1, you see that, you know, it's got senior and technical recruiter, but it doesn't have elephant on there. So that resume would be excluded. Number 2, all 4 of those words are in there, including elephant. So senior and technical recruiter elephant would pull up resume number 2. And then if you look at resume number 3, kind of like number 1, it's not going to pull that up because it doesn't have elephant anywhere on the resume. And so let's go to the next slide. Not's way is a way you can exclude resumes by excluding keywords you might find on resumes that you do not want. If I say, again, look at Boolean search strings, if I say senior or technical or recruiter, not elephant, if I look at the first resume, senior or technical or recruiter, that's good so far. I have those. I like to have all 3 of those words, but I say not elephant, well, it doesn't have elephant on it, so it meets the condition of not having elephant, so we put a yes on the John Doe. Richard Rowe has elephant and senior and technical and recruiter, Well, it has senior and technical. Well, let me skip over them. I'm going to another example. Let's just go down to recruiter, not recruiter. If you do recruiter, the first part of that string, that's going to pull up all three resumes. If you say not recruiter, that's then going to turn right around and exclude all three resumes. So you get at the very bottom, no, 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 when you use this example of not. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Quotation marks just means, if you put quotation marks around a group of words, it just means you're looking for that exact quote. So if we go down to our Boolean search strings at the bottom of the little matrix, we see senior technical recruiter in quotation marks. We look at resume number 1. Yes, it has that exact quote in there, so we'll pull that up. Look at resume number 2. Nowhere on that resume has that exact quotation marks, or quotation rather. We look at number 3, senior technical recruiter. It has all three of those words together as a phrase, that exact phrase. So under our Boolean strings matrix at the bottom, where we have senior technical recruiter, we get yes, 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 no, excuse me, for no, Richard Rowe we would pull up again right, because it does not have senior technical recruit anywhere on it, but it does pull up resumes number 1 and number 3. Now let's just change the order of the words in the second string. Now we got technical recruiter senior. Nowhere in any of those three resumes do you can find the phrase technical recruiter senior. You got all the words, but you don't have them in that specific order, a specific phrase, so you get all no's. Okay, next slide. Okay, there we go. A lot of people have a hard time with this with the wild card. It's asterisks. If you're playing 5-card draw poker and you got a hand with 3 aces and you call the joker wild, the joker in this case, for this hand, you can have 4 aces, which you can have a real winning hand. So the joker there is an ace, or can be counted as an ace. You look at the hand to the right, you're looking for a straight 5 numbers in sequence, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You don't have a 6, but now the joker becomes a 6, or can count as a 6. So maybe the card is wild because it has an unpredictable personality. It can change what its meaning depending on what precedes it. So now let's go to the next slide and we'll apply this to the Boolean searching. If you have the word just M-A-N-A-G asterisk or wildcard, the Boolean is going to pick up any word in your resume that has the word M-A-N-A-G followed by anything else. If we drop down to the column of words there, it's going to pick up managed, where the wildcard stands for E. You go down, then if you got manager, the wildcard will stand for ER. If you go down, the wildcard will stand for ERS, ING, management. If for some reason you had the word M-A-N-A-G XXX, this M-A-N-A-G wildcard would even pick up that word, even though it makes no sense. So that's the wildcard asterisk. Some databases support that, some don't. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we still got our same 3 resumes here. And if we go down to our Boolean search strings matrix, we're just going to have a 1-word search string. It's going to be recruit asterisk. So recruit is by itself is going to pick up, select all 3 of those resumes. It's going to, because recruiter, the asterisk card stands, the asterisk symbol can take the place of the ER. So it's going to pick up recruiter. It could pick up recruits, recruiting, recruitment, anything with recruit followed by any of the words after the T in this case. If we go down the second string, a second word, which is a 1-word string, we got TCHN asterisk. That's going to pick up technical. It'll also pick up technology, technicality, any word that starts with TECHN. And you're going to find that as you get into using these Boolean search strings, this can come in quite handy. So you get all yeses there for both of the Boolean strings there. So let's go to the next slide. Parentheses. Parentheses are used to group words that are connected by or, and within the set of parentheses, they are all related. Now suppose your mother gives you a shopping list to go to the grocery store and bring back some kind of sweetener and some kind of vegetable. And this store is not known for being very well stocked. So this is the way Mom writes the shopping list for you. She says, look, if you go in there and you can't find sugar, get honey. If you don't have honey, get molasses. It doesn't matter. Just pick one out of these lists that I've got here in this set of parentheses. And I got a second set of parentheses of these 3 vegetables. So you go to the store and you bring back sugar and you bring back a cucumber. And your mother said, that's great. You did exactly what I wanted to. A week later, Mom got very busy. And for the first set of parentheses, she put asparagus in there, a vegetable, with 2 sweeteners, asparagus or honey or molasses. In the second set of parentheses, where she meant to have all vegetables, she put in sugar or cucumber or tomato. So you go to the store and you bring back home asparagus and tomato. And your mother said, hey, where's the sweetener? You say, well, Mom, I did exactly what you told me to do. I took one word out of the first set of parentheses, and I took one word out of the second set of parentheses, and I did exactly what you told me to do. So this is one example, a very simple example of what can happen when you mix unrelated terms within one set of parentheses. Okay, next slide. The little man there with the magnifying glass, before I talk about him, he has a cousin by the name of Logan Login. And this little man just resides just on the other side of your TV screen. Very few people are aware of this. But Logan Login's function in life is to look at your ID field for logging in the morning and your password field. He looks at what you enter in your ID field, then he looks at what enters in your password field. Then he goes back to the long spreadsheet, looks up, and if those 2 match, he lets you enter your computer and turn it on. Now, Boolean Bob, he's looking at a different field. He's looking at the Boolean keyword field. And what he does is he takes a stack of 1,000,000 resumes, which you see down toward the bottom there. Not quite 1,000,000, but you can imagine that. He takes the first resume off the stack. And what Boolean Bob does, he holds this resume up. He then looks at the first set of parentheses and says, okay, do I find the word manager or management anywhere on this resume? If he does, fine. Then he says, okay, do I find the word HR or human resources anywhere on the same resume? If he does, that resume is pulled up or accepted. If he goes to second resume and he sees manager on the resume, that's fine. Can it be either one or? He pulls that one up. Then he also, on the second resume, looks for HR or human resources. Does not find that those words scattered anywhere on that resume number 2, so that resume is rejected. We're going to be talking a lot more about Boolean Bob. So let's go to the next slide. These are the 5 easy steps. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you at the very end. If you go through and read, you get a job description, and you need to read it and find out what are the real required skill and what's not real. And I'm going to talk more about the step 1 here, but everything you see on the rec is not real or correct. But once you identify a key skill, a key required skill, you pick keywords that would relate or most likely be found on resumes that you're looking for, like for an HR manager. Your keywords could be HR or human resources. But If you go down in step 2, and let's say you found 3 requirements for this particular job, you would come up and write 3 blank sets of parentheses connected with and. If you had a job description that had 4 requirements, guess what? You'd have 4 sets of parentheses. If you had 2, you would only have 2 sets of parentheses. Then in step 3, you take these keywords you picked out, and for skill number 1, you enter into parentheses number 1 the keywords that would point to that skill, and you connect those words with an or. And let's go to the next slide. Step 4, you verify, you look inside each set of parentheses and verify that only keywords related to one another are contained within each of the 3 sets of parentheses. And number 5, Boolean Bob takes over. And again, as I said before, Boolean Bob is going to take each resume, look at the words in each set of parentheses, and make sure that every resume selected has 1 or more terms or keywords from each set of parentheses, regardless of how many sets of parentheses you have. And I can stop right there and say this is very simple. This is what all the shouting's about, folks. This is it. Let's go to the next slide. Here we have a very simple job description. They're looking for an HR person, but also want somebody that's got management experience. And we have Delilah Doe, Rose Rowe, and Betty Bowe. We have their resumes, and just coincidentally, these are the wives of John Doe, Richard Rowe, and Joe Bowe, respectively. So these are their resumes here. So let's jump ahead to the next slide. Here we have 2 required skills. The person must have human resources, and they must have been experienced as a manager. So in the right-hand column for skill number 1, we put human resources or HR. For the manager, right now we're just going to use manager there. So we've got our keywords, and let's go to the next. This is step 1. Now next slide is going to be step 2. Okay. So we have 2 sets of blank set of parentheses here. And so we put the keywords in step 3. We're putting human resources or HR and manager. Now I've got manager in parentheses. The parentheses are really not required. I'm just keeping them there for consistency's sake, because I might want to put manager or management in there. So just bear with me. The parentheses are not required around manager, but again, for consistency, I'm going to leave them there. Step 4, you verify that you only have related keywords within each set of parentheses, and then you hit Boolean, and Bob does his thing. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Here we're going to take the same basic set of skills. Skills number 1 and 1, 2 are going to be just like the ones in the previous example. But we're going to add a 3rd skill. So the person must have experience either in a hospital or a medical company. In the right-hand column, we're going to put the keywords that would point to that skill and put hospital or medical. So we got, in the right-hand column, we got human resource HR. That's going to go in our first set of parentheses. Manager or management is going to go in our second set of parentheses. Hospital or medical is going to go into our 3rd set of parentheses. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, step 2, we have 3 sets of parentheses. We enter the keywords like we described for HR, for management, and medical or hospital. We verify it like step 4. The next slide. Step 4, we verified that only related keywords are in each set of parentheses. And then number 5, Boolean Bob does everything else for you. All you got to do is hit the enter key. Okay, next slide. Now we're going to up it a little bit here. We're going to add, we've created a string that includes medical or hospital in it. And if you can look down just beneath the 3 boxes there, 3 resumes, you see I've repeated the string we just created, human resources or HR, and management or manager, and medical or hospital. So if Delilah, what Boolean Bob is going to do an interview, first of all, with Delilah Doe and say, Mrs. Doe, I'm looking at the first set of parentheses, human resources, HR. Do you have that anywhere on your resume? She said, yes, sir, I do. I do have human resources on there. And then he goes and says, okay, Miss Delilah Doe, do you have word manager or management anywhere on your resume? She said, yes, well, I do have management. Okay, that's fine. Do you have medical or hospital anywhere on your resume? And she says, no. So at that point, Delilah gets a no under her name in the matrix below because she didn't have, it only takes one keyword missing from a set of parentheses for a resume to be rejected. So she is rejected. So now Boolean Bob interviews Rose Rowe. Said, Rose, do you have human resources, HR, anywhere on your resume? She said, yes, I have human resources. Do you have manager? Yes. And then he says, do you have medical or hospital anywhere on your resume? She says, well, I got medical. I don't have hospital, though. He says, it doesn't matter because I'm looking for medical or hospital. So Boolean Bob says, okay, you pass the test. You get 3 yeses. I'm going to pull you up and surface you out of the database. Same thing when you get to Betty Bowe. She's got HR or human resources, but she's got HR, doesn't have to have them both. She has manager, and she has hospital, but she doesn't have medical. And again, Boolean Bob says, that's okay. You can have medical or hospital. You got hospital, you're in. So all through Betty Bowe and Rose Rowe are selected or surfaced, and Delilah Doe is not. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to go back to step number 1 here, but step number 1 is the most important step of any of them. And that's determining what the real requirements do it. And there's a specific way that's right, very right way to do it. There's a very wrong way to do it. And let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The problem turns out, and this got to be a frustration for me, I'd be working hard on a resume, a rec, and for a hiring manager, and he wanted 5 required skills. And I'm having a tough time doing the search as a sourcer or a recruiter. And then all of a sudden he walks in and says, hey, I found the perfect resume on my own. The guy's a member of my bowling league, or he's my next door neighbor. And I says, do you mind if I look at that resume? And I look at it and I say, excuse me, you told me that you wanted a candidate with 5 specific skills, but this resume's only got 2. What's up with that? Oh, well, I know I told you that, but these are 2 skills that I'm really interested in. And you'll say, thanks a lot. So it turns out most of the time required skills turn out to be desired skills. Then you're going to find desired skills that turn out to be required. Then they're going to be required skills that are found nowhere on the resume or the job description. In my last bullet, I say 90% of rec job descriptions are not 100% accurate. I really would like to say 99% of rec job descriptions are not 100% accurate. So let's go to the next slide. So why does this happen? Why do we get this misinformation here that is on this job description that's got requirements on it? Because one type of resume is looking for Superman or Wonder Woman. They want somebody that is the most perfect, 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million candidate, because if I'm a hiring manager, obviously I want to pick the person that's going to make me look good as a hiring manager. And there's a way you can talk to people and kind of reason to them that may not be a reasonable thing to do. And what often happens, they ask for Superman, and they'll settle for Clark Kent, the mild-mannered reporter for the Planet newspaper in Gotham City. No, that's Batman. Or Wonder Woman, when she is traveling incognito, is Diana Prince. So that's one set. The other one is the tough one, is that your hiring manager has given you a verbal job description of what he wants. And you say, I appreciate that, but I really need a job description in writing. And he said, I'm too busy for it. Finally, you hound him, and he gives you a bread rec job description. And bread rec job description, BRHD, stands for bottom right-hand drawer. The person, the hiring manager, reaches down the bottom right-hand drawer, pulls out blows the dust off of an old job description. It's about half right if it is, and say, hey, I want you guys off my back. Here, you got something in writing. Go find me what I want. And that was never going to be correct, and you're going to wind up chasing your tail on that one. The last one is the morph, just the change. In the normal course of business, any rec, if the project changes or the customer requirements want something different, a lot of times they're going to change. So it's just good to stay in touch with the hiring manager for what they're really looking for. So the question becomes, when do you want to know what the hiring manager is looking for? Do you want to know it at the very beginning? Or do you want to go through a lot of trial and error, which is going to frustrate you and frustrate the hiring manager because you're not giving what this person, he or she, wants? So it's always important to talk to the hiring manager first before starting a search. So let's go to the next slide. What I've done in the past is when I get a new job description with the required skills, before I talk to the hiring manager, I fill out I've done this past, I fill out a matrix. I break down each of the skills on the requirements section. And I put an X in the column saying under required. And I thought I was going to get a lot more hits than I did, but when I tried to end all this stuff together, it just at the top of the matrix, it produced one resume. So when I go into the hiring manager, I say, you have 6 required skills. And the way this is going to work, if I find someone that has 5 out of the 6 required skills, in other words, if somebody who doesn't have Taleo experience, if I find somebody that only has 5 out of the 6, you're not going to see that resume. And it's amazing studying human nature after about 10 years. After I tell them that, they say, oh, and let's go to the next slide. Oh, it turns out only 3 of them were required. Now, you see at the top, I got 1,500 results. The very first time I tried this with a travel company, online travel company, the hiring manager had 6 required skills. I said, are all these required skills required? He said, yes, all 6 required. So I went through each one of them. After I finished, I told him, I says, now, if I find somebody with 5 out of the 6, I'm not going to send that resume to you because he doesn't have all 5. And there's always a long pause, and he says, okay, only the first one is required. And I said, okay, that's fine. That makes the search easy. I'm going to try to get you all of your desired, but I want to make sure that I at least cover your requireds. Now, for the examples we've been using here for HR, it's been a very simple Boolean search string. I mean, you can put together, you can use 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 keywords with ands and ors and parentheses and come up with a highly effective search. Like I say, the 5 steps are very basic, very, very simple. Let's go to the next slide. You can also come up, all the same simple concepts will work on another slide that might be a little bit more challenging. This particular one has over 800 characters. There are times when some of my strings, not often, run over 1,500 characters. So this can look kind of intimidating and overwhelming, but let's go to the next slide. This is the same keywords, but what I've done is broken this down into 5 sets of parentheses. So I could have made this a lot shorter, but like in the first set of parentheses, I'm putting together all words that could be in a person's job title. And I try to cram as many things in there connected with the or as I can, as long as they're just closely related. And the person had to have a patent. Well, he may say patent or patents, publication, papers, articles. So there has to be 1 or more keywords on each resume I surface from each one of these 5 sets of parentheses. And at the bottom, you can see at the end of the 4th string, you see the word not. It said not, I want to not at people have an MBA or a QA or a quality assurance background. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So again, this, just going to point one more time to this same thing I showed you at the beginning. These are the 5 simple steps here. There's 1, 2, and 3. Let's go to the next slide. There's 4 and 5. You work on simple searches of 80 characters or 800 or 1,500 characters, depending on the level of complexity you're trying to achieve. Let's go to the next slide. Well, that's me. You can check out more. You can go to childsbooleantraining.com. I give just, without the slides, I give a verbal tutorial of what I'm looking for. And then this is my contact information. Okay. If you would, the first set of phone numbers is my home number. If you would use the second 469-600-2167. First, you can contact me by email, but you can use the second number, which is my cell phone. So I'm going to turn it back over to Steve at this point.
All right. We're not going to call you at home, John.
Thank you.
Thanks. At this point, we've got a lot of great questions coming in. We'll answer as many as we have time for, but a few of you have asked what Identified is and what we're all about. So while you're continuing to ask your questions and we're getting prepared for Q&A at the end of the webinar, I'll tell you a little bit about Identified. At its core, we asked ourselves, well, LinkedIn is great. What if LinkedIn searched the entire social web? There's no question that LinkedIn disrupted the recruiting industry 7 years ago when they amassed the largest resume database in the world, and it made it accessible via search. But they're just one site on the internet, and you'll always have a lot more people not on LinkedIn than are on LinkedIn. So we asked ourselves, what if LinkedIn searched the entire social web for potential job candidates? Identified was a company that was founded to solve one problem, which is connecting you with great talent. We did it by building the largest talent database on the web. So we don't only give you access to millions of candidates across the social web. We also help you address some big issues that recruiters like you are facing when it comes to using social sites like Facebook to recruit. One is the data is really disorganized, and as a result, it makes searching really difficult. And we provide intelligent search capabilities that allow you to find the right candidates fast. And with data normalization and organization, you don't have to put together long Boolean strings because we've taken a lot of that guesswork out of that search for you. The second issue that we resolve is that the social web really wasn't built for recruiters. It's difficult to search for and qualify and contact candidates, and we've got a messaging center that figures out the optimal path to message your candidates, and we message them on your behalf and deliver their responses straight to you. And then finally, social media is often littered, as we know, with information that's not relevant in a candidate search, like names or photos or other information that could present regulatory or compliance challenges. In fact, let me tell you about just one of our customers who had a lot of these same challenges. Yale New Haven Hospital, they wanted to focus on improving the quality of the talent that they sourced through social media. They needed to avoid those compliance challenges, these privacy issues, and they didn't really know how to leverage social recruiting without the privacy concerns. They had hard-to-fill roles. They weren't receiving a critical mass for applicants in key positions. For upwards of 6 months, key roles were going unfilled, and they were relying on job boards and active recruiting sources with poor results. They didn't really have any experience or resources around social sourcing, so they really needed a product that was easy to use and would help them be more efficient, and we helped them. The results are there on your screen. Carolyn Greer was our advocate at Yale New Haven, saw great results as she rolled out Identified Recruit to her team. In fact, they had one hire in the first 3 weeks of using the product. So that's a little bit about Identified Recruit, and you can certainly get in touch with me if you'd like to know more about the product, but this is a teaching webinar, and we want to answer your questions on Boolean. So let's get right to Q&A, if that's okay with you, John. Let's bring you back in. Here's a question. Do capital letters make a difference?
It makes a difference, not in the keywords themselves, but for the ands and the or. Like LinkedIn Recruit, Monster, they require those ands, ors, nots to be all caps. There probably could be some Boolean search engines that do not require that, but just to be safe, because you could move it from one to the other, the ands and ors have to be, just make the ands and or all caps, but your keywords inside the parentheses do not.
Do these Boolean search methods apply to Google searches or resume search databases?
It also applies to Google. The basics apply to a Google database search. The only difference, Google uses the asterisks. Well, it used to use parentheses. They recently quit supporting the parentheses, but the parentheses are understood to be there. Within what used to be parentheses, they use the or, but when they have two words together, that's understood to be an and there, even though the and is not there. When you get into Google, Google has, because it's not a pure resume database, they have many more operators, very powerful tools beyond and or not. They have a lot of different tools you can use, but still the basic concepts are there of start off using parentheses. So there's one or more terms from each set of parentheses, even though if you put parentheses in Google, Google will not recognize parentheses, but it will help you organize your words, and even though they're ignored, it works using the parentheses. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyhow, so the principle's there. The not is used in Google in terms of a minus sign instead of N-O-T. And there are a few other, Google will recognize the quotation marks. But again, Google has a lot of powerful, I would call them Boolean operators, the search operators, that are way beyond the scope of just and or not and what I've covered. Again, what I covered here is mainly for like Monster, LinkedIn Recruiter, Dice, Career Builder, so forth.
Here's an interesting question I never actually considered, but I'm curious about this as well. Does the wildcard operator, does the asterisk, does that work in every browser?
Browsers, I don't know. I couldn't tell you that. I don't use Google, and I stick mainly with the LinkedIn Recruiter, Monster, so forth, but I will tell you that it does work in Google. In fact, Google has the most powerful use of the asterisk. Normally, Monster supports the asterisk. You can only put it at the end of a word, but in Google, you can put it at the beginning, in the middle, or if you say see the bird, you could put see asterisk bird, and the asterisk would stand for a missing word there. So the browser or using Google or whatever, that has a very powerful function. But to tell you whether or not Internet Explorer or Firefox, any of those browsers use asterisks, I don't know. I just don't use them.
Here's another asterisk question. Can you use an asterisk at the beginning of a word?
I think you can with Google. I know you can do it in the middle. Yeah, I've never have tried it with Google at the very beginning. I do know that for Monster you can only use it at the end, and LinkedIn Recruiter doesn't support the asterisk at all.
Here's a question that I'm also curious about. Is there a specific way to space out search terms? I guess as you type it in, does the spacing matter, and if so, in what way?
No, the spacing doesn't matter. If you got a set of parentheses and you put, you had a set of parentheses, you do a space and then an and. Between the and the last part of that set of parentheses, you can put 2 or 3 spaces. It doesn't matter, and you can put extra spaces if you want to. before and after the R's within the set of parentheses. I'm a big believer in a lot of white space, so where I can spread things out and show more white space, I do it just for clarity's sake. But as far as affecting the results of your search string, at least the ones that I just discussed, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect it one way or the other.
Here's a question that kind of gets to identified recruit. Can these methods be used to find people who do not have a resume out there? In other words, passive candidates.
Well, yes, it goes back again to the thing of, for example, if you use Google, and let's say I don't use Google, I would refer you to Irina Shemaeva. She has a blog, Recruiting Strings blog, that she goes real depth. She teaches classes on Google. I'd refer you to her. But also, if they, again, getting back to identified recruit, absolutely. You can write a Boolean search string, and like if you want to say just the word nurse, for me to find a nurse on Monster or LinkedIn Recruit, I'd have to say nurse or nursing, ORU nurse, or ICU nurse. For identified recruit, you've just got to put in one word there, and then the intelligence. This is part of one component of semantic search. The intelligence beneath the water level, so to speak, identified recruit. They've built an entire vocabulary of 20 or 25 words you could say some type of nurse or nursing. So if you were building a search string, you'd have to write a big long string ordering all of those terms together. But here, you can just enter one word. So that's why identified the recruit is the best of both worlds in the sense that you can take part of semantic, I call it a semantic Boolean-driven search engine. And you can search up to 1 billion candidates, everybody that's on Facebook that has a profile. You got, if you like passive candidates, you got 1 billion you can go out of. It's a very powerful tool.
We've got a question from the Twitterverse. Amanda asks, John, can we substitute the minus sign, the dash sign, for the word not in constructing a search?
You can't in Boolean. It doesn't recognize it. If they use, they will tell you up front whether you can or cannot. Now, having said that, I played around with it, and just with Monster and LinkedIn Recruiter, I've tried to put a minus sign in front of it. It seems to work, but I wouldn't guarantee it. I would stick with what they tell you to use, but if like Google, it's a minus sign, and I don't know if not would work with it or not. I'd just stay with whatever the directions tell you to use as far as that goes.
Some really in-depth questions here, and if it gets too specific to your situation, we'll answer your question via email offline here, but some really interesting questions I'm curious about. So here's one. When using asterisk, like in network asterisk, that would be the term network asterisk, will that search also find the word network or only words that have at least one additional letter after network?
No, it's kind of like the example you used for manage. If you use network asterisk, they'll find network by itself, networks plural, networking, networked, any word that starts with any D, any TWRK that has any letters like an ED ending or ING, anything after that, it will pick that word up using the asterisk at the end of the word like network.
Oh, are these Boolean search methods, are they specific to only U.S. databases?
No, I mean, I just use the U.S. databases. I haven't tried it in any foreign database, but I will say this, is that like the IEEE directory, and there's another big database called INSPEC, INSPEC, which has millions of papers, technical papers, from astronomy, science, electrical engineering, and the way you pull up papers is you use Boolean search methods, and these are methods from people all over the globe, all over the world. But as to sit here and tell you that would some database in a that's made and manufactured and used in Germany or Japan for Japan, I don't know, but I would be 99% sure they have to use some form of Boolean logic. I'd even say even people talk about a semantic search. A pure semantic search is you just lay down a rec, just job description is written, and that computer is able to read it and go through, and boom, magico, presto, you get your results. But buried beneath a semantic search are the major underpinnings of a semantic, or Boolean concepts. So I'd be very, very surprised if there's any database out there, searchable database, that does not use one or more of these forms of Boolean.
And we've got time for maybe one more question. Boy, there's some really detailed things here, and we'll pass all of them along to you, John, and you can answer them directly. Here's one. Are symbols interchangeable with the search terms? In other words, and this kind of speaks to the question that we were talking about with the minus and the not. This person asks, is the plus interchangeable with and in your search string?
Plus, okay. In Google, if you put a plus in front of a keyword, the plus sign would force that search results to have that word that had the plus sign in front of it. Google recently quit supporting the plus sign, and now you put quotation marks around a single word that forces that word to be pulled up. That's the only case I'm aware of that where the plus sign is used. Now, I have played with Monster and LinkedIn and put some plus signs and minus signs in there. Seems to work. Haven't tested it out completely, but I'd say that's the only case I'm aware of for sure about the plus sign.
John, thank you so much for this this teaching hour. I've learned so much, as have the hundreds and hundreds of students that we've had here on the line. I'd like to thank you, John, and our partner Recruiting Blogs for helping pull together this educational webinar. We do a monthly educational webinar on a topic of interest to recruiters, and if you have topics you'd like us to cover with expert teachers, please drop us a note. Our contact information is there on your screen, or you can email me directly at steve@identify.com. As we talked about at the top of the hour here, a recorded version of this webinar will be available through links on recruitingblogs.com and also in the resources section of identified.com. And feel free to share those links with your colleagues or others who you'd like to see this material, or to go back and review it again yourself. Thanks again for attending this live webinar. John, we really appreciate it, and this concludes the live event.